not everything I say is going to be 100% correct, but this is what I've gleaned from maybe the 15 minutes I've played of this race, as well as poking my head in a couple replays and looking at a couple videos right before the game went live. This is kind of like the Protoss race, but none of the races are exactly like any kind of a copy from StarCraft. Like, they're close. There's definitely some inspiration there. Like, if you look at the armor and the plating, and I guess there's kind of like a pointiness to this race, which is very Protoss-like, you know, with pylons, the way the Nexus is shaped and the gateway. So it definitely looks like that. Oh my god, I got something in my eye. Hold on. Oh, I'm tearing up about the third race. Oh, excuse me. But it's a lot more mobile. So this was, I think, if I can try to describe it best, looking at this building right here, this is like a super pylon that moves. And so you start out with this, and you need to warp things in underneath this. It can immediately move. It can land. But from what I've experienced and seen, and from some of the pros that I've talked to, you get access to the map in a way that's kind of crazy. And not I was kind of like Mothership or Mothership Core, but when I say Mothership Core was so bad that I think it immediately gives you the wrong ideas. There's a lot you can do with this, and it's kind of a central. Well, it's not a unit, but it's like it's central to the gameplay. So you're like constantly moving through the map. You can kind of go anywhere and set up structures anywhere, which gives you a lot of reach. At the same time, you can, I think, very easily be overextended. So it seems like that's going to be a balancing act. There is definitely, and I think also cannon rush might be the wrong word, although maybe you can cannon, like quote unquote cannon rush with this race. There's definitely a lot of these pressure builds where, like, once you're done with kind of the opening where you try to get the economy up and running, it seems like you're then able to have these pushes that you're using this structure with, and I can't remember the name of this building. If someone in chat knows, help me out here. I'm always a little slow to learn all the units names and building names and ability names and everything else like that, upgrade names. But there seems to be a lot of pushes and or contains you can do. Oh, I should mention this too. This thing flies over trees and elevation. Now maybe there's elevation they make in the map where like you can't go over that. Kind of like didn't they do this in StarCraft 2 for a while? There's like certain places where air units couldn't fly directly over. It's not really popular anymore, but I think there were maps where they made that, where it was like air blockers or some place that was basically a wall for air units. Maybe that'll be a thing in this. I don't know. Anyways, you can see here all this stuff is warping in underneath this. So a decent amount of the game from this race, from what I understand and from what we understand, and it's always hard to say when an RTS is new, is kind of roaming and setting everything up. Now, I'd imagine if you lose this, it's disastrous. Anyways,
construct the buildings for them, and so the main sort of thing of this race is that it's extremely mobile. You start off with the arc ship that you can see hovering around there, and the arc ship projects what they're calling a cascade field down on the ground, so you can build anywhere within that cascade field, and you can of course build
I'm gonna jump back
adjacent to buildings. So
where's
the
my mouse
buildings
cursor?
Themselves cascade fields.
So the cascade field, I'm hitting my own mic here. So that's like a pylon power radius, but it doesn't have to stay there to then have the structure powered, if I understand correctly. So it can leave
down on the ground, so you can build anywhere within that cascade field.
Which, by the way, when I first tried, I was totally confused about, because I kept thinking if I left my my structures, I'm like, well, this is just gonna unpower them, but I was totally wrong.
And you can of course build adjacent to buildings. So the buildings themselves produce the cascade field, and you can build within that. Kind of similar to a pylon for Protoss. And so because this race are extremely...
So this is what I was talking about earlier. You end up with a lot of these positions where you're going to have a push or a contain or some kind of an outpost, whatever you want to call it, that can be outside of their base, that can be powered, that I think could create for some really interesting situations.
Mobile, a lot of it is designed around getting turrets and proxy buildings and these little power stations that can actually give your units energy. You can see those purple beams going from the batteries there onto these units called the Argent, and they're actually restoring their energy. That's kind of one of the main facets of this race. In fact, I think almost every single unit in the Celestials Armada has energy, and they have some sort of a skill tied to that. So the basic infantry...
Yeah. So they're going to start out with like mana or energy, whatever you want to call it. And it seems like a decent amount of that is trying to utilize that in situations before you burn out or can't recharge it. So it seems a little bit like, you know, when we think of, I guess one of the defining features of Protoss, although I guess it's forgettable if you played StarCraft for long enough, was that there was shields. It seems like it's going to be a concept like that, but there's energy, but it's not necessarily like everything just has a spell.
Soldiers you can see down on the ground here that are being powered by these batteries. These are called the Argents, and every time they fire, they will expend some energy, but their attack does double damage. So once they're out of energy, their attack is only going to be doing half as much.
I'm going to write that down, Argents. For my cast in a second here. So yeah, he said that when they're out of power, they do something like half damage. So basically, there's a lot of these structures. It's like, what if you can follow my cursor here, like up at the top. I know there's a lot on screen. These it's similar to the concept of a Protoss shield battery, but it's actually going to grant energy to what I would assume whatever unit you target, or if it can automatically do that, give more energy to kind of give the momentum in the fight. But one thing to keep in mind is, I would assume if these get depleted or you run out of these, then suddenly the reversal would be crazy. So it seems like when you get into what I guess we could call this would be a push in the game, it seems like you would have to make it work. Like you don't have a whole lot of wiggle room.
As it will be doing as if they had energy. So for this reason, you really want to be supporting them with batteries at the front line of your attack, and that's kind of the thought process there behind that. Once you run out of energy, you're going to be a little bit more vulnerable with those. However, they do get an upgrade that you can get for them, which basically makes them sit out of the fight for a few seconds, and at the end of those few seconds, they will restore all of their energy. So they're kind of like, you know, a bit of a go in, do some damage once you've got the energy, and then once you run out of energy, you really want to move out of there and restore some way. The next unit we have here are the Vectors, and you can see them glowing in blue here, and they actually have the ability to teleport somewhere and then recall to their original position. So those little glowing pink purpley circles, those are the original positions of the Vectors, and if you hit the ability again, you can recall there. Now every time you teleport or recall, it does cost energy, but again you can get an upgrade.
So this unit, it kind of reminds me a little bit like a manta ray or something like that. It's like both a stalker and an adept, in that you can blink in like a stalker, but you have a specific area from wherever you blinked from, you then would recall to that area. So it's almost like a hybrid of the two, I think.
Here, which makes the energy cost of recalling free, and it also gives the Vectors the same health that they had when they teleported when you recall them. So these are fast moving harassment, hidden run type units, and the idea is that you teleport into an area, you do some damage, and then you recall back out of there, hopefully with the energy and the health that you went in with. Then we have the Kree, and these are my overall favorite units for the Celestials here. These are built from the second production building. The mainframe, they kind of remind me a little bit of a Zealot. They have these multiple blades, and you can get an upgrade for them that allows them to roll around the map, which of course increases their movement speed. But once they meet an enemy, they'll sort of like unfurl themselves in a flurry of blade strikes and do AoE damage around.
So this seems to be this seems to be a good adjustment between. Yo, thank you for the $5 on YouTube, Gauntlet Wizard. I see you, man. Appreciate you. This seems to be a pretty big improvement from the ideas of the StarCraft 2 Zealot while getting rid of the problems with the StarCraft 2 Zealot. I guess the StarCraft 1 Zealot was always fine, right? But it was just like a basic melee attacking unit. Thank you, Blind Rock.
Man. What a pile of shit.
Thank you very much, Blind Roar. And Cheeseburger Andy, I see you. I'm
Blind Roar just subscribed.
I'm pausing.
Tier 3 units also in the next update.
I think so. I believe they are. Cheeseburger Andy, I see the sub. Thank you. I'm pausing subs just so I could finish my thoughts on doing this. But I appreciate the support, guys. So, what I was saying a second ago was that the Kree is, it seems like an improvement on the StarCraft 2 Zealot. It fixes a lot of the I mean, there were cool ideas with the StarCraft 2 Zealot, but there were some problems. The StarCraft 1 Zealot was fine, but I guess it's just a basic melee attacking unit. No, Blind Roar, you don't need to apologize at all, man. You guys could sub. I just forgot my alerts were on while I was doing this video. The thing with the StarCraft 2 Zealot is that they gave it this charge ability, and because it's like an automated attack, you have to kind of hope you get good pairings with the Zealots. This is something a lot of pro gamers have complained to me about. That, you know, it's not something you can kind of finesse. You sort of create the Zealots, and then you sort of hope that they get a good engagement, that they don't get stuck behind something. Basically, that charge thing, or what is it? Is it, yeah, Zealot charge? You don't get to control that. And so with this, it looks like you have a Zealot, but the speed upgrade is that it rolls, so it can roll once into an attack, and then it's just a melee unit again that you're controlling, versus a thing you've kind of lost control of and have to wait for the cooldown to end. Thank you for the sub, Dr. Goose. I appreciate you.
Them. So really, really strong against light armored units like Fiends, Gaunts, that kind of thing. And furthermore, when they get low on health, they will actually become invulnerable and then self-destruct after a few seconds.
So, again, I haven't actually played this race. I haven't used this unit. He says when they get low enough on health, they become invulnerable and then self-destruct. So is that like a Baneling? I'm not totally sure. And if so, how much damage does it do? What does that mean? I'm curious. Or is there some kind of like it's like a Zealot Baneling? Okay, thank you guys.
So they can really do wonders for your army composition and kind of, you know, just
that seems
give
really
the enemy
good.
Player something to think about there. Then we have the Saber. These are the siege vehicle for the Celestials. They fire this giant laser beam from a range, and they have two different abilities. One of them allows the Saber to move much faster because you may notice they have an excruciatingly slow movement speed, but it comes at the cost of some health. And the other ability actually allows them to repair their own health. So they do have a self-repair. However, it will make the Saber extremely vulnerable while that's going on. And
so this looks to me almost like he said tank, but I almost feel like a Reaver. I guess it doesn't have the splash damage, but kind of a slow, roly-poly looking guy moving around that does damage. And keep in mind, the Reaver is basically it is like the siege unit for Protoss. I feel like a lot of times what we see with it is drops, so it's easy to kind of change, I think, what the original role of the unit is in your head. But if you're going to be doing these pushes, I guess this would be the backbone. This is going to be what allows you to snipe like their bunkers or anything else like that.
both of these abilities have a shared...
And by the way, when I'm saying all this stuff, keep in mind, it's totally possible some of these units come out being used in ways that weren't intended. Like, if you guys remember when the Colossus was announced, like, that was one of the big units they debuted, and all that could do was walk up onto high ground. Which, by the way, was a crazy concept at the time, that you could just have something that could circumvent, you know, a plateau and just walk up, and had this crazy range. But then when the game came out, and even a couple months into it, it was really just used as like this thing on top of your army that was like a siege weapon. It wasn't used to like run into mains with a couple of Colossus and do damage and then run back out like you might see with the Reaper. So, yeah, I mean, all the stuff we're seeing here, people could retool it.
Cooldown. So if you just use the boost ability to get yourself across the map and rejoin your main army, well, guess what? You're going to have taken some damage, and the repair ability is now going to be on cooldown. So you really do have to make a bit of a choice there. However, you do also get an upgrade for those that increases the efficacy of both of those abilities. Then we've got two different spellcasters for this race. So the first ones are called the Animancers, and as you can see here, they make these gigantic black holes that slow down enemy units and deal a ton of damage to them. And those purple thingies with the laser beams, those...
So these spellcasters, I think, kind of remind me of Templars. I guess, excuse me, their version of Psystorm is going to be something that does damage, but also has kind of a molasses-like effect that's going to like slow them down. Kind of make a little quagmire that's harder to move through and inhibit stuff from running away or attacking in.
I believe are called the Cabals in the playtest that we played. They didn't have any art, so they certainly didn't look like that, but I think that's what they are. Those are the second spellcasters, and they actually have a mind control ability so that they can take over other units. And finally, we have the flying unit for the Celestials. These are called the Scythes, and they have a really interesting ability. When they take damage, they will actually consume some of their energy and become immune for a few seconds, being able to tank any of that damage. So I guess the idea here is that your opponent is going to have to micro around this ability, and the goal there is going to be to try to trigger it for all of the scythes at once instead of just letting the front one tank all of the damage. Furthermore, they also do more damage with their attack the closer they are to a target. So unlike most flying units where you want to stay at the maximum range so that you can get away easily, with
I need to go back. I can't wrap my head around that. Hold on, one more time. Sorry.
Ability, when they take damage, they will actually consume some of their energy and become immune for a few seconds, being able to tank any of that damage. So I guess the idea here is that your opponent is going to have to micro around this ability, and the goal there is going to be to try to trigger it for all of the scythes at once instead of just letting the front one tank all of the damage. Furthermore, they also do more damage with their attack the closer they are to a target. So unlike most flying units where you want to stay at the maximum range so that you can get away easily, with the Scythes, it's going to be a little bit more like Mutalisk play, where you really want that death ball to be like on top of the unit, take it out, and then get out of there.
That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, that took me a second. So basically, when they take damage, they'll use their energy and become temporarily invulnerable and be like a sponge, a damage sponge. So you probably want to, excuse me, probably want to like trigger that and then try to attack something else. So it's going to basically force you to micro. But that's interesting that it does more damage the closer that it is. So I wonder if the other races have or will have something that can kind of net that or like freeze that or lock that away, or how exactly that works.
Once again, just like with many of the Celestial units here, once you run out of energy, you're not going to be able to use that invulnerability anymore, so you really do want to get out of there, get back to base or wherever your closest batteries are, and recharge that energy. So those are all of the units here, but let's talk a little bit about the Celestial mechanics, because as you may have noticed, they are rather different from the other two factions. So at the start of each game, you will have what they call a Morph Core, and this Morph Core can form into two different buildings. The first one is a collection array. You put it down on top of a Luminite mine, and it will automatically gather Luminite for you.
So this is kind of like you know, an assimilator, extractor, refinery, only it's automated. So it doesn't off the bat require like another delivery mechanism. Yes, wisps. Thank you, Blind Roar. Yeah, it's like a super wisp because you only get one luminite thingamajig. So yeah, it kind of goes on top of that and then soaks up resources over time.
And a tick rate of 10 luminite each tick. And the Morph Core is also a flying unit, which means you don't necessarily have to take your natural at the start of a game. You can move this thing over to the corner of the map, or the middle of a map, inside some hidden trees, or really anywhere you please. Now you can build more of these Morph Cores from your Arc ship, but you can also build...
So, yeah, you start out with this Morph Core. It can go anywhere. It is like, it's a floating unit, and so... This is one of the things I had trouble with until I saw some replays, was when I was trying to play this race, I kept trying to, like, because in my head it's like Protoss, right? So I'm, like, trying to just do, like, a one-base build or maybe expand. You really just start to reach out all over the map. It's kind of crazy. Floating probe. It's more like a floating drone, YouTube chat. Because if I understand correctly, it becomes a structure. Yeah, it's very different. In fact, even if you're like a Zerg player in like maybe StarCraft 1, I guess it's also true in StarCraft 2 as well, where like you're kind of used to, okay, I'm going to take 3 bases right away, and maybe they'll slow my 3rd base down. This is like, you can expand in more different directions. Obviously, there's going to be probably, on some degree, at more risk, but you are at more liberty to kind of go anywhere on the map. But from what I can see, I don't feel like you get to engage with the creeps on the map early. So there's probably a lot of things you got to be careful with about that. But yeah, it's almost like you're going to look at the map in a totally different way.
A worker unit called a prism from the Arc ship, and you can use prisms for 2 things. First of all, they are used for mining therium, and second of all, they are used to boost the output of your collection array on top of a luminite mine. So if you put 3 of these prisms on one collection array, it will actually double the output, increasing the tick rate of the luminite from 10 per tick up to 20 per tick. Now, as I mentioned before, you can also use these to harvest therium, and they can return the therium directly to your Arc ship, but alternatively, you can take your Morph Core and morph it into the other building, which is called a Fabricator. Now, the Fabricator both acts as a drop-off point for therium, so you can put it down right next to a therium patch. It will also spawn with 1 prism there to start mining therium right away, and furthermore, the Fabricator can create more prisms for you.
So the prism, when I look at it, it just looks like it looks like a floating pylon. But it moves. It's like a resource gatherer, which can boost your luminite income. Again, if I'm understanding this correctly, and can grab the therium like is said in this video. But it's a very different approach. So you have like some workers, some errand runners on the map, but no, Dr. Goose, it's not exactly like a workerless race. It's almost like you have these mobile pylons that kind of boost, as far as I can tell, just like resource gathering. But it's not like, you know, when you have a ton of drones or probes or SCVs. You have a very limited number. And so, yeah, it's interesting. I will tell you this, I have a hard time wrapping my head around. I don't feel like RTS games always come that easily to me. But yeah, I don't think they've shown this on screen, by the way. This floating pylon guy. What is it called again? I just said its name a second ago. Now I can't remember. What is it? Wait, does it say here? Okay, whatever.
Really interesting mechanics that these Celestials have is the rally system for
Prism,
their
thank you.
buildings. So you can basically designate one of the buildings, kind of like how it works in Command and Conquer if you've played those games, as the primary building, and all of your units of that type are going to come out of that building. So the first building is called a bastion. Let's say you have...
So this is a concept that was never a thing in StarCraft. It is a thing in Command and Conquer, like he said. I welcome this idea. This is interesting. It feels like this is what's going to be the factor that kind of, if you're not able to balance, if you're not able to manage this feature, you're going to be brought to your knees when you play this race because you're able to like stretch out over the whole map in a way that even I think Zerg can't. But you have to toggle where things are popping out of, which is different, by the way, than Protoss StarCraft 2 Warp In, where you can warp in anywhere, but you're warping individual units in from the gateway. Here, it seems like you're going to have to switch in between those structures. But I think that's a smart feature to kind of make the race. You got to work to get control of what you've got.
5 bastions in your base, you go and build 1 proxy bastion on the other side of the map, you designate that as your primary building, and now all 6 of the Argents that you build out of those 6 bastions are going to come straight out of the proxy one. So this allows you to defend back home or use your buildings very offensively. As you can tell, this race is really all about that. It's about taking risk, building out on the map so that you have a foothold, you have those batteries down to restore the energy of your units, you're going to be putting production buildings out there so you can get them into the fight much faster. Actually, even the research buildings for this race, they have offensive abilities. So again, you've got a bit of a choice there. Do you want to do what you normally do with research buildings and hide them in the corner of your base so that they're well protected? Or do you want to put them on the front lines so that they can make use of their offensive abilities?
So that's another interesting concept. I guess it didn't even occur to me, but I guess like you would never have like the Twilight Council as part of your proxy, right? Or the Dark Templar Archives. Well, I guess maybe you'd make like the Dark Templar Archives or the Dark Shrine or whatever. Maybe next to your proxy gateway because that's just like the only place you had a pylon to put it at. But it seems like you can do an all-in that is like... Because, you know, like something that's I've thought about as I've cast it over the years is sometimes I'll say this is an all-in and then it's like it doesn't work, but the game's not over. So I guess it's not an all-in. I've always wondered if I've misused terms when I'm casting. Because, like, I feel like if I say it's an all-in, well, this is like now or never. But every once in a while, like, both sides get beaten up and then the game moves on. But I feel like this would actually create an all-in because if literally all your tech is there and all your buildings, you know, boosting energy and production's there and the primary structure that's going to let you warp in buildings is there and it doesn't work, that's about as all-in as you can be. Yeah.
Obviously, there's some risk reward there. It can be difficult and expensive if you do go out onto the map, especially with your arc ship being there to allow the building and you lose the arc ship. It costs like, I think, 500 Luminite, maybe 600 to build a new arc ship, so it is not cheap.
Jesus,
and
600 Luminite to build a new one?
The race that I just want to cover here is the energy system. So the batteries, not only do they charge your units up with additional energy, they also power your base. So if your base gets low on energy, you won't be able to build any more buildings. However, you will still be able to construct units.
Yeah, this is another concept. I didn't even pick up on it when I first saw it. You have like an overall energy. I think this is also something from Command & Conquer. I played Command & Conquer a bunch as a kid, but I sometimes I'm not remembering some of the specific nuanced things about the game. But didn't you make power plants in Command & Conquer? But it was like it just sort of powered the whole base. It wasn't like a pylon, right? Power plants, right? Because I remember getting engineers as a kid and just like unpowering my friend's base. Low power. What happens with low power? Things build slower. That's Red Alert. That's Command & Conquer 1. You can do that. Or was that... Wait, wasn't it? So there's some feature like that here where you need to have things powered up. I haven't quite wrapped my head around it. You lose the map. That would actually be something pretty cool. Wouldn't that be crazy if you could do that in this game, if there was a way to like turn off your opponent's minimap? Ooh, that's actually a good idea. I think we just cooked up something sick here. But there's for those of you who haven't played Stormgate, there's like a toolbar at the top of the screen that also allows you to use abilities that cost a certain amount of energy, and I think there's a certain amount of power. Basically, that these little guys, they kind of look like StarCraft 2 shield batteries here, and Yeah, I guess that's another thing where like you're so all in because if you lose these, then you don't have that general power as well. If I'm I might get some of this wrong, by the way, guys. I've had very limited experience with this race. I'm just kind of reacting and thinking out loud.
Out of the buildings that you already have. So as you expand your base, you need to create more of these batteries. By the way, I keep calling them batteries. I know they're not called batteries, they're actually called power banks. Furthermore, these also allow you to use your top bar abilities. If you lose too much power, you won't be able to use any of the abilities at the top there. So just to quickly run over the abilities, the first one allows you to power down or power up a building. It doesn't cost you anything. You can do this, I believe, as many times as you want. So if you are kind of in the shit and you really need some power back, you can power off some of your production buildings to gain that. The second ability
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So then that would be okay. So if you're unable to have everything powered, you'd have to like go to each of your buildings and then figure out which ones you want to deprioritize to unpower. Okay.
To turn any one of your buildings into a really powerful turret. This is great defensively. You can also...
Can you power off buildings in Command & Conquer? Could you manually do that? I don't remember. Maybe it was in the new ones. You could with that. Well, that was in the new ones, though, right? Well, I guess new was in like the ones that were 15 years old instead of like 25 years old. I have no memory of doing that at all. No, you could sell them. Okay, whatever. We're getting sidetracked here. Sorry.
Land your arc ship. I don't think I mentioned that, but you can land the arc ship and it will have an attack then. So you can use this to defend your own base at the start of a game, or you can use it offensively in a proxy rush to attack the enemy. And then this Guardian's Wrath ability is extremely powerful if you put it on that building. The third ability is a scan. So the Vanguard get the dog to scout with, the Infernals get the Hexen, the new caster unit that they can spawn the skull with to scout with, but the Celestials don't really get any scouting units, so instead they actually get the scan ability. Now all of these abilities are on their own cooldowns, so you don't have...
Yeah, so the scan ability, it's interesting. You start out with a scan and it makes a big scan radius for... 2 seconds, and then it makes a smaller radius for, I think it lasts for 6 seconds or 8 seconds. I can't remember if it's an 8-second total scan and then a 6-second smaller scan. So if you really need to zero in on some position, you can do that. But if you were to be scanned and then you wanted to make tech to hide, you would make it in the periphery of where their scan was. If you were like, I guess the other two races aren't inhibited by where they build stuff. Anyways, that's just like an interesting feature.
Any resource that you have to manage the same way you do with the Vanguard, you may as well be making use of all of them at the same time. The fourth ability actually allows you to send a beam of light down to kill a creep camp, and the fifth one sends another beam of light down that restores the energy of your friendly units and takes energy away from enemy units. So there you go, guys. That was a pretty quick overview of the Celestials. I will be doing another video on this a little bit more in depth once I'm able to use my own footage. You can also expect to see some casted games. Just a bit of a heads up that I am pre-recording this video before the PC gaming show. Actually, the day after that show, I'm going to be leaving to vacation for a couple of weeks. So if you guys don't see much content here on the channel, that's the reason behind it. Don't worry, I haven't abandoned it or anything like that, and I very much look forward to getting back and of course later on in the summertime jumping into early access with you guys, playing some games with you, casting some games, doing some build guides and all that good stuff. So make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss out on all of that content. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video down below, guys, and leave a comment as well. Let me know what you guys think about the third faction. Is it what you expected? Are you surprised about it? What do you think overall? Leave it down below. Cheers for watching, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.
So, this is Stormgate Central. Do give them a subscribe there on YouTube. And we're going to be doing some casts. I have some replays of Parting versus Theory. These are two of, if not the two best players in Stormgate right now. I'm looking forward to that and seeing how they're going to play. It is Parting playing the third race, the Celestials, which is very cool. For those of you who are watching this on my YouTube, please like and subscribe. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about the abilities. Is some of this overpowered? Is this new faction interesting to you? And see this shirt? We have Taste OSHA shirts, a whole bunch of other cool stuff at tastelessthreads.com. RTS designed images, esports stuff. So check that out. I'm sure there's something there that you will find that you will like. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in a future video.